Hello, good morning. Welcome to the Sunday Supplement. Coming up on today's show, Gareth Southgate, he reacts to England's defeat in Prague by claiming England they're not ready to win Euro 2020. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, he gets the backing of Manchester United's board ahead of next Sunday's Premier League clash with Liverpool. And Pep Guardiola, he rates Phil Foden so highly, he claims he wouldn't sell him even for 500 million euros. Some big valuations on these boys with us this morning. Shaun Custis, he's head of sport at The Sun. Rob Harris, he makes his debut. He's global sports correspondent for Associated Press. And Dave Maddock is the northern football correspondent with the Daily Mirror. Thanks very much for joining us this morning. Good to see you. Thank you. Don't forget, you can tweet the show at Sunday Sup. The best will appear on screen over the next 90 minutes. Let's have a look at what's making the back pages of the papers this morning. Mail on Sunday, improve or you're out. Different interpretations of Southgate's quotes this morning across the back pages of the Sunday newspapers, but Southgate warning his players ahead of their clash with Bulgaria tomorrow night. They need to improve. That's Southgate's warning on the back of the Mail on Sunday. No chance of winning Euro 2020. That's the back page of the People this morning. He said something very similar after the defeat against the Czech Republic on Friday night. We're only human though. Gareth backing his three lions. That's on the back of the Star this morning. Harry Winks on the bench, he'll be in on Monday night, according to the Express this morning. That's the link, that's where he needs to play. He needs to be back in that team. What about this man? Could he be back in the team? Should be, judging by the way he played yesterday. Fancy a game, Stevie. The People having a little bit of fun. Stevie G played for Rangers, the team he manages, and Liverpool yesterday in a charity game up at Ibrox. Back page of the Sun. You've had your chips. This is James Maddison. Interesting story. This is on the front and the back of the Sun this morning. James Maddison sent home by England because he is ill. On Thursday, he misses out on the game. He missed out on the game on Friday night against the Czech Republic, and of course on Monday against Bulgaria. But on Friday night, instead of watching the game, he was pictured in a casino in Leicester. Not a good look for an England forward hoping to make his mark with the international team. And I just want to reflect on this actually. Is it a man on the moon moment? I'd like to know. I'm going to ask Rob about this in a moment. Eliud Kipchoge on a lot of the front pages, particularly of the broadsheets this morning in his marathon time yesterday in Vienna, 1 hour 59 minutes and 40 seconds. I'm quite intrigued by your thoughts in your wide-ranging role, Rob. I know you're here to talk about football mainly, but I'd just like to ask you about this and the provenance of it and the integrity of it. Is it a man on the moon moment?
I mean, it's certainly a landmark moment. He's managed to break through this mythical 2-hour barrier. I interviewed him actually the day it was launched in the Oxford track, where Roger Bannister obviously had his big athletics breakthrough. And he talked about inspiring just people beyond the world of athletics, showing anything is possible. And there's loads of talk around the pacemakers, which were rotating in and out, which meant it wasn't an official record, and the trainers, but ultimately he has managed to run a marathon under 2 hours, and it's something to celebrate. Yeah. I watched it yesterday. Shaun, what's your marathon time? How you can't be too far behind Kipchoge, can you?
No, about 5 hours, I think. Look, it was an interesting experiment, and it's interesting for all the attacks on Nike this week with about the Oregon project. It's almost like, I know this was in place beforehand, but was it deflecting from all that attention which was on their Salazar and stuff like that? But I found it interesting as an experiment. I really don't understand this argument about the shoes, because they say, well, the shoes, that's made all the difference. Have they got springs in them or something? It apparently makes 4 minutes difference. I read one writer say it's akin to making you running downhill all the time. Surely shoes can't make that much of a difference. We'll all be wearing them and running to work. Yeah. Wouldn't we, if they're that good?
Dave, similarly impressed?
Do you know what? Not really.
Not really?
Oh, come on, Dave.
The joy out in his home.
Just because the pacemakers and the way that it was all set up was, I was really confused at the end because they were all running behind him, and it was bizarre. But rotating them out. Yeah, he ran under 2 hours, but not under any conditions of a marathon. So it doesn't count. It doesn't count.
Doesn't count.
Yeah. I don't think if we had the pacemakers and trainers, we'd be breaking the record. And of course, it was an advert for Sir Jim Ratcliffe's company as well.
Yes,
yeah.
So you interviewed as well.
So linked with Chelsea.
Okay, let's move on to the football then. And Friday night in Prague, Shaun. What were your thoughts on the performance? What happened? Why England lost?
Well, the initial thoughts are that we've gone backwards from when you think being in the World Cup semi-final last summer, and thinking after that
last summer was the
2018, 2018, that we lost, but there was hope. Gareth Southgate had given the team so much hope, and the fans, and belief, and we think Euro 2020, it's virtually at home, we've got a great chance of winning it. And if you look at that team, you thought, well, there's probably only Ashley Young who won't be in that team going forwards. And you had Lingard in it, you had Ali in it in 2018, summer of 2018. And whatever you think about Lingard, he was playing really well for England at the time. And now it seems that we've just completely lost our direction. Players are out of form for their clubs. Back four is all over the place. He's changed from what was his favourite 3-5-2 formation and seems to have just ditched that completely and not interested in it anymore, although there is a suggestion he might go back to it now. And I think it's the hope that kills you with England. It's always been like that, and you get your hopes so built up by that semi-final appearance that I actually really did believe we'd go on. Look, it's only the first qualifying defeat in 10 years, and actually, if you go back to the Ukraine defeat, which I was at in 2009, that was a dead rubber. So the last meaningful qualifying defeat, I think, is Croatia in 2007, the home game. So it's a long time. So you're allowed a bad night at the office, but it's probably two. Conceding the goals against Kosovo has probably made it 2 bad games, and there's a worry around England now that this is quite a big wobble. I'm sure they'll get through. I'm sure they will beat Bulgaria on Monday night, and we'll get through. But Southgate has always urged a bit of caution, and now it's even more than caution. It's serious worry that we won't live up to what were the expectations from 2018.
Definitely need to make an impact next summer, Rob. What about the 2 players at the back here, Michael Keane and Harry Mcguire? Mcguire admitting pretty much that he's losing confidence. Not surprised playing in that England defence at the moment and the Manchester United defence at the moment. But that's not the kind of message that you want to hear from England's defenders.
No, and the fact there's so many changes in defence from Southgate, you're never too sure who's going to be at the back. I mean, yes, Keane and Mcguire have played a few games together, but across the back, he's just been shaking it up far too much. You wonder how much that affects things in terms of the organisation, if they're not playing together. And obviously, if you bring in Chilwell, he's used to playing with Mcguire from the Leicester days, so there's that cohesion there. But yeah, Keane was really struggling. It's seen out, caught out in possession at times as well on Friday night, and this complacency that seems to be there. Maybe we've got too used to qualifying, and it's become just that calmness around things. The fact, we'll get there, and this will affect things potentially with the seedings as well. We could potentially end up with a group with France and Portugal if the way things work out, although we will have the home games at Wembley.
Yeah, of course. What were your thoughts on performance and the mood around that England team? Because it struck me, it's so unusual, Dave, that, 3 or 4 players don't play well, that's not unusual, but this felt like a whole team.
Yeah, and I think, there's an overreaction, first of all, because, under Southgate, England have performed, probably punched well above their weight, not just above their weight, but a long way above their weight. Semi-final of the World Cup was a significant achievement for a side that really wasn't probably as good as a semi-final place. And then the year later with the Nations Cup, but perhaps the same as well. They got to the latter stages when there was a time when they maybe could have actually got relegated from that, although if anybody knows how it works, then please explain it.
There's a man in us.
But I think there's a slight overreaction because maybe, as Shaun was suggesting, the expectations have been built up. The reality is England have world-class forwards, a lot of world-class forwards, but they don't have world-class defenders. They didn't have world-class defenders in 2018, but they had a system which maybe masked that a little bit. And the midfield worked well in the system in 2018. But again, they're not world-class midfielders. None of them who played the other night are. And I think that's the problem, that you look at it and there's a lot of very talented young players around and getting into the squad, and Southgate is absolutely sort of putting the future in their hands and giving them opportunities, but maybe they're not quite ready. And
Henderson's got a ton of experience.
Yeah,
he's got a stack of experience.
absolutely.
You watch him every week for Liverpool, and it's very rare to see Henderson have a game.
That's my point. Henderson fitted in brilliantly into the 2018 side, did his job to perfection, but really he doesn't have the players around him that perhaps bring out the best in him. Whereas at Liverpool, he does at the moment. So, he is the ultimate professional, and I think his experience will be important next year for England. But I think that there is a lack of quality there when you look at it in the midfield. There's no real creativity there.
What about Keane, though? You'll see him a lot more often than we do. And I think to the rest of the country, probably don't really understand why he's in that side. It may be because of a lack of other options. But he's been found wanting quite a bit playing for England, hasn't he?
And you know, maybe the biggest problem is that both centre-halves are out of form. There's no doubt. Everton have lost their last 4 games, and the finger's been pointed at Michael Keane, and probably quite rightly, because he's looked. He actually did play very well for Everton over the latter part of last season and starting off this season, but he's lost confidence. There's no doubt. And the same with Mcguire. Absolutely, Mcguire is a player without confidence at the moment. He said so himself. So you go into a game with only 2 centre-halves playing a flat-back 4, and both of them are out of form and out of confidence. So, you know, that is not the level which you can get away with at international level.
What surprised me a little bit on Friday night was the way that Gareth Southgate talked about the quality of this England team. He said, we're not ready to be a top team. It took one result, Rob. One defeat in qualifying. The first defeat in 10 years. I think Shaun said first significant defeat since Croatia in 2007.
In European or World Cup qualifier.
Yes, yeah. First defeat that actually made a difference. It just seems so strange to hear him saying that, given the results have been good.
Yeah, I mean, you can actually compare the 2 England managers, because Phil Neville with the women's team's actually been a bit prickly when he's faced criticism and the results haven't gone his way, and whereas actually Gareth is far more realistic in terms of actually downplaying expectations and just getting that sense of, actually, let's not get ahead of ourselves, and maybe Shaun is still letting the players as well, just to keep that sense of we're not the finished product. Just because we've reached a couple of semi-finals 2 years running doesn't mean that we're suddenly ready to win the Euros next year, and a lot more is needed to raise the level of throughout the team and to actually know that.
But we want the demand to be there, don't we? You said that it's pretty much a home tournament. It's certainly weighted in favour of England. There's no question about that because the game's won. But we want the demand to be there. The demand at Liverpool, correct me if I'm wrong, is to win Champions League or League or both if you can do it. The demand at Manchester United, not this season, forgive me, but win the League, win the Champions League. The demand at Real Madrid, win the European Cup. Got to do it. Those are the demands. Those are the terms of engagement. So why aren't we saying about England?
Well, we were, weren't we? The demand was that we would win. Was it the 2022 World Cup?
The clock was at St George's Park counting down.
Yeah, we will. Culturally, why isn't that the demand? Oh, if England get to the semi-finals, they'll have done well. Well, that's all well and good, but when's the semi-finals?
I think it is the demand now. I think we've been told how many good young players we've got, and we have got a lot of good young players. One thing that does concern me is it's always, if things go a bit wrong, let's get the youngsters in. Well, we can't get many more youngsters in. We're actually one of the youngest teams we've got playing, and now there'll be demands, to get even more, to throw out some of the other old guard, but you're old guard when you're 27. You can't win anything with kids, but I don't think you can pack the England team in front of them. Sancho, didn't produce his best performance the other night, which was a bit of a surprise, I've got to be honest. I think we're entitled to have an expectation that England might win the next Euros. I think we were entitled to have that after the World Cup, and seeing how they performed, seeing the spirit, especially as I said before, there weren't that many players in that squad, in that team, the starting team, who you think would be over the hill even by 2022. It probably was only Ashley Young from that team. Therefore, you would expect progression and improvement. And it looks like regression, which I think has caught people out. But I still go back to I'm not big on systems, as you know, but I still go back to, I don't understand why he went away from what had become a favoured formation of 3-5-2 and has gone off to he basically ditched it, didn't he?
What formation do you think we should have played that day in Russia when me and you were centre halves against?
But when we lost 9-3.
Was it? We got 3, did we?
Might be 9-1. Redknapp was in midfield though.
He was.
Jamie Redknapp.
He was still running. He was still running the show. That was the amazing thing about it. He was man of the match in a 9-1 defeat.
That was a bit of a struggle with 11 at the back and still lost 9-1. So it's hard to pontificate really when you're losing 9-1 in Russia, isn't it?
But it is always that sense that after every tournament exit, say, well, actually things are okay because it's all building now towards the next one, and the next time is when we will peak. Yet we're always just fall short. Then the next time, it's always looking ahead without actually ever hitting the peak.
Just quickly, the Mason Mount coming into the team, I thought was great, but watching it, particularly in the first half, he appeared to be almost playing centre forward, and that sort of caught me out because whenever I've seen Mason Mount play, he seems to produce his best work bringing the ball forward, coming on, rather than back to goal or side on and that. And I didn't think that England got the best out of him the way they were playing. I thought it was a struggle for him, but maybe that will come from learning, playing more games.
It comes down to it's personnel, isn't it? That's the reason why he shifted away from that sort of back three or back five, whatever you want to call it. And you look at it, and that's why I'm saying maybe there's an overreaction, because Stones is injured, and he has Gomez, who's not played much, so he didn't want to put him in because he's not played much this season. But he also has Walker, who for some reason is not in the squad, out of favour. But so he could go back to that back three, which did so well in the last
Stones
two
wasn't
summers.
playing well, though, was he, Dave? Even before he got injured.
He played well. He played well during the World Cup.
Yeah.
He absolutely.
So did
played
Lingard.
well.
So did.
But the point being that they got away with it.
Yeah, maybe.
They got away with it. I mean, in the sense that individually, maybe there's a question mark about all those defenders, but they gelled very well together. So he can go back to that. But you look at the other night, and the two centre halves on the bench with no experience whatsoever. The Chelsea boy, he's played 7 games or something like that. So I mean, a great player, absolutely fantastic player, but clearly you wouldn't want to put him in these circumstances. But maybe if they can get back to that, the form and fitness of the back three that they had, that will give them more of a foundation again, and we don't have to overreact.
No, sure. Okay. Just want to chat about James Maddison as well. Shaun, back of the Sun. Maddison's England career. Of course, he was excused from the squad on Thursday because he was ill with a sore throat. On Friday night, England played Prague. Maddison pictured in a casino on Friday night, so he didn't watch the game, but around 9 o'clock on Friday night he's pictured in a Leicester casino. It troubles me that Maddison would be in a casino at his age. I know you disagree with me about the age, but also while England are playing, the team that he talked about only this week of dreaming about playing for, that was his lifetime's ambition, his goal, and he spoke with such remarkable enthusiasm about it. When I looked at that picture yesterday, it just doesn't look good for a player who wants to make his mark as an international footballer, as an England player, and instead of watching the match, being with friends or being at home, wherever, is out at the casino.
It doesn't, especially when the FA put out a tweet on Thursday saying, "Get well soon, James," and clearly he did get well soon, very, very quickly. Look, as I said to you, being in a casino at 22 on its own doesn't bother me. I'd be a hypocrite if I said that's wrong, because I did it myself. But I don't think you'd have seen Harry Kane doing that if he'd been ill the day before. And I think it's part of the learning process that he needs to be sensible about things. Also, you've got to take into account the backstory to this, that, as you've written about before, Neil, that at the under-21s during the summer, Southgate was not impressed by some of the under-21s' behaviour. Maddison was part of that group, and that's why Southgate has been a little reticent to bring him in. But his performances meant you had to pick him, frankly, and his performances still will mean you'll have to pick him if going further forward. I don't think this will mean, personally, that that's the end of an international career, but you are sort of giving him an option, if you like, of leaving you out if you don't take it seriously enough. And I think that is just, it's a daft thing to do. I don't think it's akin to falling out of the pub, you know, having had a load of beers on the night when England are playing. But, you know, be sensible, stay. And if he is all right at 8 o'clock on Friday night, I think he should be ringing England up saying, "I'm all right, I'm fit, can I fly out for Bulgaria again?"
Yeah, why wouldn't you?
Indeed.
It would have been a better look if he would have been in a pub maybe watching the game. I think it's the bad judgment call being on his own.
With an orange juice.
Frank Lampard was, wasn't he?
With the FA's mental health campaign. Yeah. And I mean, it just shows the decision-making is not good from his behalf. Go to the casino later on. You know, you can go at 10 o'clock and still go there. But, to be seen...
Do you actually think that he could have gone at 10 o'clock? You should watch the game, then go to the casino. If you've been ill the day before and sent home... In fact, it's actually... The FA actually said he has withdrawn from the squad. That's the way they phrased it. They actually... The tweet sort of put more of the onus on him rather than them.
Because they said last night that it was their decision.
The actual phrasing of the tweet was...
You don't have to give a reason for Gareth to have something against you in terms of questioning how you are around the squad and your mentality and your commitment in that way.
Yeah, sure. Okay, well, I'm sure it won't be terminal for his international career, but not a good look all the same for Maddison. Okay, next up we'll have a look at some of the issues from Friday night, some fan trouble in Prague. We'll also talk to Rob about the Qatar 2022 World Cup. He's just come back from Doha. We'll talk to him about that. It's coming next. Welcome back to Boutique Sunday Supplement this morning, because some of the guests want to talk about some issues and some are not so keen on others. Let's talk England fans, Dave, which is an issue and a subject you are very happy to talk about. 31 arrests in Prague on Friday, 14 of them England fans. It's a problem that just won't go away, despite the repeated requests, warnings and pleas from pretty much everybody. What do we do next?
I'm seriously troubled by what the nature of the fans that are following England at the moment. I think that you listen to some of the chants, you see them in the bars and even at the grounds, and they're chanting about Scottish people, about Scousers, about what appears to me to be a kind of a right-wing influenced sort of agenda, and I fear that there is, and we've all seen that there are right-wing groups in our country at the moment that are targeting certain elements of society, and football is one of them. And you know, there are some right-wing groups that are targeting football that call themselves a football group when they're clearly not. And for me, this is a serious problem for England and for the FA, and I think they have to address it instead of just saying, we want you to not do this, we want to educate you. They need to look at whether there is actually infiltration of England fan groups by right-wing elements who are using it almost as a front. And if that is the case, and I fear that there is undoubtedly some element of that, then the FA has to do more. They have to look at that and address it.
By doing what?
Well, I mean, perhaps using the police, undercover police, looking at what the infiltration actually is, how far it's gone.
To be fair, Dave, they do use undercover police, and they have used undercover police for a long time. And this week, as Neil was referring to, they made a real concerted effort to get the message out there. They had this campaign, "Don't be that idiot," appealing for people to shop fellow fans. Look, they made it. They really had a go at it. They also strangely said they'd ask UEFA to change the night of the game, which I think is a bit odd, because they'd say, "Oh, you know, Friday night, that's no good for England playing a game." Well, what? It's Saturday?
Yeah,
well, Saturday, you'll have to rule Saturday out. Probably have to rule out Thursday night, because people might take a Friday off work. And UEFA can't do the fixture saying, that might be a tricky one when those fans go there.
My point is that if there is, and there is certainly a fear that this is the case, that it's far more than just fans drinking and becoming aggressive, then there needs to be a serious look at that. And there are ways of identifying whether there is infiltration, whether there is this element who are inciting this type of behaviour. And then in which case they have to find ways of challenging that legally and getting those people out of that.
I get that, but I first started following England in 1997, and essentially the type of group which has followed England, the aggressive sort of group, hasn't really changed. Their sort of politics may have changed slightly, or the message, but the way they behave hasn't really changed a great deal.
I mean, I agree. I was there in 1992 in the European Championships in Malmo, and there were rioting in squares and stuff like that. But to me, it is different, because suddenly it's far more political. There's a lot of chanting about different ethnic groups, about different groups in British society, and to me that suggests there is a bigger, wider problem now, and I think that the time has come to face that head on.
And we saw it at Euro 2016, obviously all the disorder there, but some of the chants, whatever your views on Brexit, the fact that's been used provocatively in the streets, there was anti-Putin chants, again, a provocative political nature to them. But what we did see there was also the police. They do act in a way, they go overseas, and I actually heard they would go up to certain fans and say, "We're watching you. We can gather evidence and deal with this back home." And they try on an individual basis to often approach the fans to deal with it there. The thing is, we have these "Don't be the idiot" campaigns, but how much do they need to actually address some of the messaging more directly rather than these broader general messages? Because it is continuous. Whenever we go to somewhere like Amsterdam or Portugal or Prague, we're encountering these problems, and You know, it's not going away. It's not the majority of fans. Prague was, you know, a seemingly quite small group.
Rob, what about the toughest measure of all? So, okay, the FA take the decision themselves. They take the initiative and say, okay, next away game, no England fans.
I mean, it could get to that stage. I mean, one of the things is to work with the local authorities and stop bars selling drink on the day of the game. I think we saw it when Chelsea were playing at Lille the other week. That was something the local authorities did. There was no sense of trouble there. There is also, it's not just England. You know, there are often cases with Dutch fans, whether it's Ajax or the Netherlands national team, where you can get hundreds of arrests at games. So it's not just an English problem, but it's something England needs to deal with. Because remember, at Euro 2016, there was the threat of expulsion. Is it
a sports story or is it a news story? Because the England arrests at football matches, we usually have to turn to the front of the newspaper. I just wonder whether the sports pages, which is where most fans are reading, are turning to, a newspaper, most football fans are turning to. Do we make it a sports issue?
Yes, sit alongside the game itself, and also want to hear from some of the players. I think maybe the messaging from them as well.
We are very reluctant to, aren't we, Sean?
Yeah,
Germany, England, we did.
They always,
we were not alone, but the Sun tore everything and said, okay, this is about the fan behaviour that night. But it's rare.
Yeah, and I think it's also what's really troubling from the FA's point of view is that when you're trying to get a message across, anti-racism message, and a big one across Europe, and really stamping our feet and saying this has got to stop, is then on the other side you've got people in Europe looking at us going, hang on a sec, why don't the hooligans stop? Because England are exporting hooliganism all over Europe, and they would be perfectly entitled to say, you know, get your own house in order on that. I know Gareth has said about racism that we have to in this country as well, but hooliganism has been our problem for many, many years, and as far as I can see, hasn't really changed very much.
I mean, and obviously with the home Euros as well coming up, it's going to be a...
Do you think that'll be worse? I think it's usually worse when it's travelling supporters. It's also, as we well know, it tends not to be the bigger club supporters. It tends to be clubs from lower leagues. That doesn't excuse it, but they don't travel with clubs as a rule. So this is almost their way of getting out to a party and drinking and following a team, if you like, abroad. And some of them just go off the dial. Yeah. Also, things like it's been an anthem with England for years and years, which is no surrender to the IRA. And that, believe me, Dave, I think that's a political message, and that one's been going on for 30 years.
And it could face UEFA sanctions as well for that. I mean, England are probably quite fortunate to avoid being prosecuted for that. You know, when we talk about should England walk off and when England players face racism, if that is used in a game against Ireland, that raises potential issues as well.
I think your point as well, that the players will always go and clap the fans at the end. You could only make a statement, I suppose, by not doing that, but that's very unfair on the fans who are very loyal to following England and keep their noses clean, if you like, and behave.
Which is the same argument they would have if they were banned from a game. Okay. Yeah. All right, well, let's hope the game tomorrow night in Sofia against Bulgaria passes off without incident and without any cause or need for any reflection after that. Let's talk Qatar World Cup. You've just been to Doha, haven't you, for the World Athletics Championship. There weren't many in the stadiums, were there? Where was everybody?
No, it was pretty empty most nights.
More press than punters. Yeah,
I mean, they really struggled to get the locals in. They gave some sort of quite fanciful numbers on attendances some nights, but when you've got things like 100-metre final being sparsely attended, it's not a good look. But, and without sounding too hipster, I did go to an Asian Champions League semi-final during the Worlds as well, and they did get a crowd in there for Xavi's Al Sadd against Saudi Arabia's Al Hilal, and it's a 15,000-seat stadium, but it was largely full, and that was a lot of locals as well. So athletics has a wider problem in terms of attracting interest and fans, but hopefully it's a wake-up call for them in terms of empty stadiums do not look good.
Are you a hipster?
I wouldn't count myself as that.
Sean, are you a hipster?
Probably not. No. Dave's definitely.
None of us got a couple of Libertadores last year.
But I think that come the World Cup, I would still expect the stadiums to be full. I mean, people are already talking about trying to take in 2-3 games a day. That's probably Henry Winter. But they probably are.
Well, Henry did the FIFA last week. He called it the FIFA. He went Newcastle.
Well, anyway,
Newcastle on the
Sunday.
no, that's the week before, wasn't it? Week before he did the FIFA, yeah.
5 games in 5 days.
Games
basically.
in 5 days.
But at the World Cup, journalists will probably be able to do at least 2 a day. And I think there are fans. It could be quite a touristy type World Cup. There are fans who are already talking about, can you get 2 games in a day? I don't know. You might be able to get 3 games in a day. And it's not far to travel. And I think you'll find that the stadiums will be full for most games.
Yeah, I mean the traffic can be quite bad, but they're improving the roads. I mean, there's obviously all sorts of human rights and worker welfare issues that are well documented as well.
They are
relating to
well
the building.
documented, but perhaps not so much on this programme. If you want to read Amnesty International's lengthy report, if you've got the time to do it, and I think most people should, because it's fascinating, but should we be bringing more attention to that?
I mean, particularly as it gets to the World Cup, we have to remember things like the Khalifa Stadium, where the athletics was held, is where a British worker died as well while involved in the building, and an inquest last year found there were safety issues linked to that. So we can never forget the issues that were associated with the worker welfare conditions, now we're dealing with lack of pay. Now there's a lot of workers in the high heat that are building the facilities, not just the stadiums, it's all the infrastructure around it. There's a new metro, there's a new road. So while they have improved the labour standards and they have had to sharpen up things because of the scrutiny after the 2010 vote, the likes of Amnesty are still calling for more progress, more rights for workers, payment on time. So it's going to be an issue as well that the team, England team and any other home nations and any other teams that qualify for the World Cup will also have to get used to addressing as well, how you balance off the fact, yes, we're here, should have come to Qatar in the first place, all the issues associated. But when they're there now, I think fans will probably have a low expectation now, but it'll probably be better than they expect.
Have you seen firsthand, the migrant conditions for workers in Qatar?
Yeah, I've been around some in the past, and they're very different as we would expect here. Multiple people to a room, but the World Cup organisers say that they are improving. But last week, when I was in the
when you went into a camp or an area where people are living, what was your view as a Westerner? What was your view?
I mean, this was a few years ago when it was the showcase accommodation that the Qataris were showing off, and yes, there are sort of 3 people living in a room. That's not what we would expect here at all. And it's that big question, why, when they have so much money, they're investing so many billions in this World Cup, that the reputational and PR damage that has been suffered by Qatar when they hope to produce any benefits, it would have been, if only they paid the workers a lot more and had better conditions from the start, they would probably not had a lot of this negativity around it. But they didn't realise, around 2010 when they won it, that they didn't seem to have any grasp of the potential fallout and the fact they had to improve their conditions. And yeah, there's still many concerns over very small pay as well.
I can't believe we're sitting here, that the football world is sitting here and saying, well, this tournament's going ahead, there've been problems with it. Problems are people dying and people allegedly being almost treated like slaves, and many people dying. We're going to go to a football tournament where it has been built on the deaths of workers, and that is obscene, whichever way you look at it. And can you imagine, for instance, if the European Championships being held in the UK, partly in the UK next year, and there were that many deaths in modifying and updating the stadium? It's staggering and unheard of and appalling.
But whenever I walk through scenarios like that, Dave, and you are absolutely right, but whenever I try to walk myself through it, is most people say you're out of your comfort zone. I would be out of my comfort zone writing, investigating a story like that, because I never have, and not many people have got the skill set. Not many journalists have got the skill set. Not many sports journalists. I don't want to speak on behalf of our entire group, but not many sports journalists have got the experience of properly investigating a story like that. So it leads me to, Shaun will ask me what's the team tomorrow night, or what's the best line from the game, because Shaun would know that's my area of comfort and perceived expertise, whether you agree with that or not. But Shaun saying to me, okay, go to Qatar next week and investigate migrant rights, worker rights in Qatar, would leave me scratching my head thinking, where do I even start? I mean, the answer's at the beginning.
Yeah, the reality is that as sports journalists, we generally are not equipped to do that form of journalism, but there are journalists who are and have been, but there needs to be far more made of it. The Amnesty report, which you reference, is shocking, and it needs to be disseminated much further. But the reality is, it's the football's governing bodies have sat back and allowed this to happen and done virtually nothing about it. And so, you know, we can point the finger of blame at us, and quite rightly, I think journalists should have done far more. But in the end, the finger of blame has to go to the Qatari authorities and to to FIFA. What have they done about it?
Final point.
I mean, when you mention the number of deaths, we'll often get sort of quite low numbers announced by the actual World Cup organisers. But that's work-related deaths. We don't hear necessarily about every heat-related death. We don't have inquests, so we don't know if, you know, the reason so many heart attacks.
Even when they're relatively low, there's still many deaths, and there clearly are more that are related in some way. So I mean, it is staggering and appalling, and I can't believe that they have not addressed it, and they have basically, FIFA have got a free ride on this.
I mean, one thing FIFA have done is they have actually improved now the checks for future World Cup hosts. So when Morocco were bidding against North America for the 2026 World Cup, something I uncovered was they wouldn't make their human rights risk assessment public. I obtained it, there were things missing, and there was a lot of scrutiny on Morocco's human rights, and the North American bid won. But one thing that brought it home, just how difficult the conditions are to work. I was in the Lusail Stadium that's been built for the final, and it was over 40 degrees, so hot as the workers were out there in the pitch that my phone stopped working.
Yeah. Okay. More scrutiny to come on the Qatar World Cup, which of course takes place in 2022. Okay, next up we're going to go back to the Premier League. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, he's got the backing of the Manchester United board, but for how long? Welcome back. We'll be talking Manchester United in a few moments' time. Just a reminder of who's with us this morning on the supplement. Shaun, Custis, Rob Harris and Dave Maddock. Let's just remind you as well what's in the papers this morning. Back of the Sunday, people, no chance. That's Gareth Southgate's message to the nation after that defeat on Friday night. No chance of winning Euro 2020. That's according to the back of the people. Different interpretation and twist on this story in the Star this morning. This is Southgate saying, well, we're only human. Players can have off days. They certainly had one on Friday night in Prague. They play Bulgaria on Monday night when this man will be playing Harry Winks, according to the Express. This morning will take his place in the centre of England's midfield. We wish we had this man in the centre of England's midfield. Fancy a game. Stephen, the people having a bit of fun. Yes, with Steven Gerrard. Played for Liverpool and Rangers yesterday in a charity game up at Ibrox. We've been talking about this story as well this morning, back of the Sun. You've had your chips. James Maddison pulled out of the squad on Thursday, Friday night, instead of watching the game at home. He was pictured in a Leicester casino. And then the story we're going to come on to right now, Shaun. Oliver Holt's column. It's brutal reading for Ed Woodward if he takes the trouble to read it this morning. United are a horror story, but it's been counter Ed Woodward who's to blame, and he should be fired. It's very rare that someone goes that far. I know that Martin Samuel, whenever he has to talk about manager or an executive, Shaun, is very reluctant to say a man should lose his job. But Ollie is pretty strident this morning and makes his argument in his column. Are United's troubles, problems and woes down to this man, down to one man?
I don't think they're down to one man, but I don't think Ed Woodward does himself any favours by not having appointed a director of football, a technical director, somebody who could take the pressure off him. He is clearly, as we well know, a good businessman from the point of view of commercially bringing in lots of sponsorship deals, but eventually, if United decline, you would think that that will run out too. So you need success on the pitch, although it will take a while for United to be disappearing into the world of averageness in terms of big clubs. They might be average on the pitch, but in terms of big clubs, it takes a while. I think Woodward, I find it difficult when people say, well, it's all his fault. He has made lots of money available. He's persuaded. The only problem I could see was when he didn't give Jose Marino centre-half, which Jose banged on about, said he needed the centre-half. He actually gave the next man the centre-half, but it was too late. He got them Harry Mcguire. Maybe he does pay over the odds sometimes. That is the nature of where Man United are. You have to pay a bit over the odds. I think Woodward, as I said, it's quite difficult. He's actually quite good at trying to get his message across with the press, so he probably doesn't get actually as much stick as some people think he should get. But
it's not been an easy week for him.
But he's not helping himself by not bringing in somebody who can work alongside to talk about to have an overview of transfers. There was a bit of talk about somebody like Van der Sar coming back maybe, and I do think that would help him. He does seem to want to have total control over everything, which is probably not a good idea, especially in a club that is of that size. You need more help. It can't take it all on yourself.
Monday, so after the Newcastle defeat last Sunday, Tuesday morning, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer would have woken up to headlines across most newspapers saying that he would be sacked or could be sacked, possibly be sacked, if they lose against Liverpool, which is their next game, which of course is on Sunday afternoon, Rob. By Thursday, Henry Winter had written, well, actually, they're backing him. Solskjaer's got the complete backing of the Manchester United board. What does that tell you, though, about the state of play at the club at the moment?
Yeah, I'm hearing as well from within the club that they are trying to be patient with Solskjaer. They are not necessarily planning any sudden moves, and the fact they recognise it's a bit of a wait they're going to have to maybe to get back up the table. The thing is for Woodward, it's got so many managerial appointments wrong, or it's had to sort of reverse track in terms of sacking so many managers now that he can't get this one wrong. I mean, if Solskjaer does not work out, the scrutiny does come on Woodward a lot more from above, from the Glazer family, because he is ultimately the one signing off on what was a gamble. A manager whose Premier League experience was a relegation.
But their record of firing managers since 2013, since Fergie is it's 3 managers, isn't it, that they've got through. Real Madrid's 5, Chelsea's 5 in that time. Trophies won 3.
Yeah, I mean you'd hope.
Arguably Community Shield, Europa League, FA Cup.
Chelsea had a lot more
Cup.
of a structure seemingly than
Jose
United.
counts the Community Shield.
I count it, but others wouldn't.
I mean, one of the problems that is how the fans hear from the club and from Woodward, and often it's via those calls with investors that we get to listen in on and report, and he's talking about the sponsorships and how many Instagram likes a signing got, and they're not necessarily hearing always the message. What I do know from within the club is this sort of coverage and the negative commentary around the club is affecting the staff. I know there've had to be reassurances in the last few weeks where they've been talking to the staff about the debt isn't affecting things in terms of our ability to sign players, and also the fact that there is a proper structure in place to sign players, and that's something they've actually had to talk to the staff about, because they're seeing all this and they're getting pretty demoralised internally from what I hear, the fact that seemingly there is no proper organisation higher up in the club.
Can we just get one thing straight? There's no way Woodward is going to be fired. There's just no way. So you can write all the columns you like. He is making a massive. He is basically allowing the owners of Manchester United to buy the club using Manchester United's money and not their own, and service the debt that they have taken on. The club has taken on to pay for their ownership, and he's doing it in their eyes brilliantly. And that financially they are in the strongest position they've ever been in terms of global reach and strength. They're the richest club in the world, essentially.
He is not doing himself any favours by not bringing in somebody to help him to work alongside. The perception is he is in control of everything.
I agree.
Well, what about the? I mean, the agents go to Matt Judge, don't they? Who is? Are you going to say he's not a football man?
No, I'm not saying that.
Sorry.
But ultimately, everything is Woodward's call. Everything. I mean, you've got to see the sense in bringing in somebody with a bit of experience working in that sort of area to help him. It's not admitting defeat in his eyes. It's just saying, it'd be great to have another sounding board to work with me. What's wrong with that? And he could save himself a lot of stress.
And maybe quite a step down maybe for, well, not a full step down, but for Edwin van der Sar, because actually he's got quite a big role at Ajax chief executive.
That's a shocker to say, to step down to go to
but he's also one of the vice presidents or chairman on the European Club Association, so actually he's rising up the game, so maybe he wants the big job.
But if you're a club like Man United, that's probably exactly who you should be going after and say, we're Man United, come over here, here's a big wedge, sort us out.
I think
would he want the main job?
People are losing sight of that. It is Manchester United, and the fundamental problem is the appointment of Solskjaer. And I hate to say it, because I agreed in many ways with what Woodward was wanting to do, which was change the culture of Manchester United. He wanted to take them from spending ridiculous amount of money on players that were too old, who were at the end of their careers, or just a name, and there are many of them. And he wanted to get a younger profile, wanted to not just buy to turn the team around in a short term, which is why he stopped Marino from signing the players he wanted to. And I agree with all of that. But to then implement the new policy, which is younger players, bringing them through, buying young players like James in the summer, to implement that policy, you need a manager like, say, Klopp, Pochettino, someone like that. And they got Solskjaer with no track record, with no CV. And the reality is, you look at Manchester United now and you say, what's his philosophy? I ask you, what is his philosophy?
His philosophy is, I think, to bring through younger players, to do it
but
the Man United way, and to go back to where they were in.
I'm talking about on the pitch. Can you tell me on the pitch what his footballing beliefs are? Because you have no idea.
You wouldn't know watching last Sunday at Newcastle.
And the fact they got that penalty at PSG seems to define so much. You know, got in the contract maybe, and it sort of set him on the path to get the job permanently.
When they were absolutely battered.
But would you have done anything else?
Well, they should have left it to the end of the season, I think. I think making that appointment mid-season. They said it was to give the...
Did you say that? Did you say that? Okay, did you say that at the time?
I'm trying to remember now. Someone can check my Twitter feed.
A lot of Manchester United pundits and ex-players, though, put a lot of pressure on to say give him the job. Loads of them. All of them was hard to a man.
It was hard for Woodward to resist that, and he didn't show perhaps enough leadership to resist that. It was a great appointment in the short term to give him time in the summer to get the right guy, and then he caved in with the pressure that you say. And you can't. I don't think you can really blame him for that. But I think a stronger football person would have resisted.
Perversely,
until the end of the season.
They gave him the job after they'd lost 2 games, didn't they? So they didn't give him it when they were on the roll. They actually almost to say, aha, we've got much more long-term vision than you think. We're going to appoint him now after he's started to be on a losing streak, which was odd.
But it is all that muddle meshing as well. Like we were being told towards the end of last year it's all about the technical director appointment, the director of football, whatever you want to call it. And then suddenly when Solskjaer gets the job permanently, we hear less about that. And that's faded as well in terms of what sort of person they even want for that position. So it's the direction from above and the type of executive they want around overseeing the team seems to change so often.
Yeah, it does. Okay, we're going to talk about United's next opponents in the next part 4. It's Liverpool at Old Trafford on Sunday. Not the kind of game the United need right now, but Liverpool, they can't wait for it. Welcome back. Let's talk Liverpool now, Dave, because their next game, of course, is at Manchester United at Old Trafford on Sunday afternoon. They're after their 18th successive Premier League victory. If they do it, they will equal Manchester City's record. Are they in condition to go and do it at Old Trafford? Well,
obviously, yes. I mean, Manchester United are certainly not in any condition to face Liverpool, and the Liverpool that has won all those games. It's interesting because it's Klopp's 4th anniversary at Liverpool this week, and in fact, on Sunday when they play Manchester United, that will be the weekend of his very first game 4 years ago for Liverpool when they went to Tottenham, and they drew 0-0 with a pretty shocking team that, when you looked at the bench, had a lot of kids who are no longer at the club. In fact,
I'm going to test your powers of recall here, but can you remember? I was at that game actually, and I can barely remember a name on the Liverpool team, the 11 that started, let alone the bench.
I can tell you that of the 18 that were in that squad that day, only 3 are still at the club, and that's Firmino, Origi, and Milner are the only 3 who played that day, or were in fact in the matchday squad, who are still at the club. And in fact, Henderson was injured, I think, and missed it, and Firmino was also missing that day. In fact, I think there's only 7 or possibly 8 if you include Klein, who would have left had he not had an injury, who are still at the club from the entire 30-something man squad that Klopp inherited. So in 4 years, he has basically got a completely new squad with only seven players remaining. And that actually shows not just how far Klopp has come, but the incredible job that he's done, because he has transformed Liverpool back into a powerful force in European football that is feared by sides in Europe. some of the biggest sides in Europe fear Liverpool, and he has made them into a credible title contender. There's no doubt about that.
If we were to draw an arc, Dave, did Klopp, when he took over that team 4 years ago, that game at Tottenham, did in his mind's eye he have the system and the way that he plays the game in his mind? 2 fullbacks bombing on, his front 3 that are interchangeable, that pretty much cannot be stopped, the enforcers in the centre of midfield that he can perm Henderson, Milner. Okay, this is a system that has been designed, but did he have that in his mind?
Yeah,
when he arrived?
He did. You know that first game against Spurs, you were there. Liverpool increased the distance run on that season, the most they'd run that season before he arrived. In that one game, they increased it by more than 5 kilometres. So straight away, he had an impact. He was only there 3 days, and he had an impact. They ran 5 kilometres further than they had done any game all season. And he had to implement that particular very aggressive pressing, very aggressive running style. And if you think back, you remember back in his first full season, they seemed to run out of steam a little bit by Christmas. And a lot of criticisms coming from some coaches. There was a Dutch coach who criticised him heavily, saying he's too demanding on players and he will break them, and his style can't work. He's with the better players he's got in, with the bigger squad he's got that of his players, he has refined that now so that they still have that high energy, that pressing game, but in a different way now, and they're more targeted in the way they do that. But absolutely, he had a plan. And it's strange because we just mentioned Solskjaer in the previous part of the show. Klopp had a plan from the start, and you could not only see what his plan was, but you could see it evolving over those 4 years I've watched very closely. And it has evolved to make them into a top European side. And I think that squad that he inherited, and as I say, there's only 7 left out of the entire squad, I think it was much worse than the squad that Solskjaer has currently. Much worse. And yet Klopp got them to 2 finals in his first season. And since then, he's got them in the Champions League every season.
You think the Liverpool squad that Klopp inherited 4 years ago is worse?
Yeah.
Was worse than Manchester United's current squad?
But,
Absolutely.
sorry, does that suggest Brendan Rodgers was actually doing quite a good job then with a limited squad?
I think Brendan Rodgers did a better job than people perhaps give him credit for. He almost won the title with Liverpool. He then lost his best player by far, and didn't replace him. Couldn't replace him. Tried to, eventually ended up with Balotelli. It was a disaster. But actually, they were not as bad as Rodgers wasn't as bad as people say. But I think Klopp is a different level, a totally different level to that. And he's taken Liverpool, and no matter whether you think their form hasn't been as convincing this season as perhaps the results are suggesting, the reality is they are now a side that is feared. I look back to last season. Manchester City went to grounds and sides surrendered against them. They were like, we'll play a weakened team because we can't win this and we'll look to next week. But they didn't against Liverpool. They were like, oh, we know we can get at Liverpool because they're an attacking side, we can get in behind them, or that we can set piece them and stuff like that. This season I've noticed sides are beginning to approach Liverpool like it's not a game we can win. It's a damage limitation game. And I think that is the transformation that Klopp has made. And we were talking before, and I said, I genuinely believe that fans of every club in the Premier League would want him as their manager. And I think even Manchester United fans have said, we would love to have had Klopp as our manager, because he's that mixture of a truly top-class manager, but also this personality that fans love as well. And I think there are many reasons why Liverpool is successful, and it's not just Klopp. They have science, they have analytics which are groundbreaking, which incidentally Manchester United simply don't have at that level, and you need to have these days in the highest level of football. But Klopp himself, his man management, his personality is a huge factor.
There's a perception as well that from looking from the outside that he put so much into it, so much energy, so much enthusiasm, 100% full on all the time. they're almost like a player running around the pitch. Can he keep this up? This, which is why I think he talks about having a sabbatical at some point, because to maintain that level is almost like his high press of the players on the pitch.
Yeah.
Do you think you just suddenly go, I can't keep at this
you look
rate?
at his record, and he can keep it up because he was at Mainz for 7 years, and he was at Dortmund for 7 years, and he did keep it up. But it's very interesting with him is that I think his greatest quality is his ability to find the right personalities, and people have overlooked this. That, for instance, they nearly signed Nabil Fekir from Lyon last summer, and in the end, the reason they didn't sign him was not because of the injury. He did have an injury; it was a problem, but they could have done the deal anyway. But there were problems, and the agent actually came out and admitted this only a few weeks ago. There were problems. He got his brother involved, started demanding more money, began to not even speak to the Liverpool people. And Klopp was like, we can't have that personality in our squad. And he picks the right personalities that respond to his energy and to his man management. And you can see it. They believe. They're all like Van Dijk says often, this is special. The relationship we have as players here, it's special. And Klopp is the one responsible for that.
And the ability to refresh the squad as well. If we look at the troubles at Spurs at the moment, it's this sort of young squad that's now got old, players running out of contract, and not being able to bring perhaps the number of new signings they want in. Yet all the setbacks that we thought Liverpool were going to sort of struggle after, losing Coutinho, having to sell him, for instance, they've actually managed to strengthen the squad off the back of it. I mean, when I interviewed John Henry ahead of the 2018 Champions League final, and when he was saying, I don't know why any player would want to leave Liverpool, particularly for there, and actually he was also talking about the importance of Mike Edwards as well in actually the recovery at the time, and it is the ability to bring players in. So they've now got amongst the best players in the world in so many positions, obviously, with Salah, Mane, Van Dijk and Alisson as well. So it's probably maybe not a position that Liverpool fans expected they'd be in either in 2010 when they're going through the ownership struggles, or even after just missing out on the title, or when Klopp came in.
Klopp actually said to me just before the start of the season that he didn't bring new players in because it's the first time in his managerial career he's not lost players. He's kept his very best players, and he actually wanted to see what he could do with a team that he put together that then wasn't subsequently broken up, and that was huge for Liverpool as well.
Okay. Will they do it then? You think they will? On Sunday? Not the title.
On
Sunday. Will they go
on
18
Sunday,
in a row?
it would be a shock if Manchester United get anything out of that game. A huge shock.
They should be ambitious and go for the win.
Yeah, they'll win it.
Oh, you know what that means, don't you? We'll find out next Sunday. Of course, the game is live. It's on Sky. Okay, next up we'll talk about Phil Foden. Is he really worth 500 million euros? And Marco Silva at Everton. He's under pressure. We'll talk about that. It's coming next. Right, this is troubling me, Shaun. Phil Foden, 500 million euros. What's Pep on about?
Well, it's interesting because earlier in the week the debate had been about whether Pep fancies Foden at all, and then we serialised this book, Pep City, which is just coming out, in which he said he's the only player that he
wasn't
would
my favourite bit of it, Shaun, but on the front cover it says a great read, Pep Guardiola.
Pep Guardiola, yes. Let's say he cooperated with the book. But in cooperating with the book, he puts in this quote, which he's never said before: I wouldn't sell him for 500 million euros, which is astonishing, really, when you're not playing him. As you said in the week, we'll play him then, if he's worth all that, get him in the team. Especially given that City are now 8 points behind Liverpool, and, you feel the team might need a little bit of an overhaul. I honestly haven't seen enough Foden to. Everybody says he's going to be a great player and fantastic and will be the future of England, etc. But I don't think we've seen enough of him to really know, have we? We think he will, but
yeah, I mean that's the problem. If we're only seeing him in bursts, an EFL Cup game at the end when they're already winning convincingly in the Premier League, and just getting 100 minutes or so this season, or it's not enough. I mean, it's not enough for him to gain experience, to be pressurised in the most difficult of scenarios, and he needs to be getting game time. It's not enough just being around the training ground and learning from Pep and the others. He needs to actually...
What struck me about it, guys, was normally we get excited all about football, that we see glimpses of them and think, OK, this can be the next... And then we'll pick a player from the past that they've got some striking similarities or some characteristics that are similar to a player in the past. But this was his manager, and I thought that kind of headline, 500 500 million euros, I wouldn't sell you for that. Creates pressure around Phil Foden. Because go on then. Show it, prove it.
Isn't that good, though? Isn't that good?
No, I didn't think it was good. I think it was nice. No.
Well, no, but I mean, from the player's point of view, it's not going to think, wow, he really does rate me. So I'll show him. One of the things that's been levelled at Foden is that he's not pushy enough almost. Well, that's difficult when you're an 18-year-old to come bang on the manager's door and say, I demand to be in the team. That said, Michael Owen was in the Liverpool team, and Wayne Rooney was in Everton and then Manchester United. It seems that when they're youngsters, very young. So if you are an amazing player worth 500 million, you probably should be in the team, no matter what the other personnel.
You look at it though, and who's he going to replace? And it's like David Silva or Kevin De Bruyne, and perhaps Guardiola's looking, because David Silva's last season, so he's looking slightly further down the line and thinking this is a season for him to play a little bit more, but eventually prove that he is a replacement. So he's perhaps giving him that, I'm backing you, I believe in you, so that he can essentially move him into the side next season. But I'll say this. I write a column with Robbie Fowler, who was a City player, of course, not just Liverpool. And he says that he believes that Foden wouldn't have come through in any other Premier League side. And he doesn't mean that in a bad way, because he rates him really highly, thinks he's a fantastic player. But he thinks the type of player he is, and the sort of slight frame he is, and the fact that he's not an explosive player, but he is a Guardiola player, and he thinks that he would have. He's clearly got talent, but he thinks he wouldn't have come through and played yet at another Premier League side. But Guardiola, because he likes that sort of player, and he obviously had Iniesta and Xavi, etc., Barcelona, he sort of can see that type of player in Foden, and maybe has given him more of a sort of platform than perhaps he would have got at other clubs at that age.
But there's that great story from the Messiah, wasn't there? Because there was a sign on the door that said, if you're under 180 centimetres, just turn back. You're not needed here. And Guardiola took that down and said, we play very differently.
Yeah. And obviously Foden certainly fits into that category. And you can see him becoming a David Silva type player, but whether he'll be that level is a completely different question.
Just need to talk a little bit about Pep's future as well, Shaun. We need to get on to Marco Silva, but quickly, there just seems to be something in the wind here that are we sensing the end of Pep? 4 years in, is this coming to the end of a cycle? We've seen it before. Historically, it would tell us yes, because Barcelona's 4 years, Bayern Munich comes to Manchester City, but it just feels like there's a little bit in the wind here of, is Pep hanging around?
I'm with you. I understand why you say that, but City have been behind this distance before in a title race and won it. It just feels that it's a bit early in the season to be this far behind, and I think there would be concerns if you're a City fan that the cycle is done. He enjoyed having his time off previously before Man City. It's a hard job. It's a pressurised job. He throws everything into it the way Klopp throws everything into it at Liverpool, and I think eventually that probably tells on you. And he is a man who previously has looked for other projects. To walk out of Barcelona is quite a difficult thing, I would think, to go on another project. To walk out of City.
I respect him for, if you're burned out and you said, okay,
absolutely. And I think that's distinctly possible. I'm not sure what the next project is after you've done Barcelona, Bayern Munich, Man City. It's probably, I suppose it's Italy.
Toon?
Is the next one. You really do have to work miracles to put us back.
Maybe it's back to Barcelona.
I mean, think he would do that?
Possibly, yeah. I do think. I think if he wins the league this year, I think that he will. I think because he is so intense and takes so much out of it.
What about the Champions League? Because he failed to win the Champions League at Bayern Munich, and there's a feeling that he really should win it at Manchester City. And if you don't, can you be considered, I don't know, the ultimate super coach if he hasn't delivered that as well?
And he hasn't delivered it since Barcelona in
2011.
2011, yeah. So I agree, and possibly that is the trophy, or winning the league this season, that will say, okay, I've done my job. If he could do both, then obviously I think that you would see him go, right, I've done it, and then walk away, have 12 months off, and then see what comes up.
I mean, it is a blot on his CV if he doesn't actually manage to win the Champions League at City after Bayern Munich. It's that's the competition where he's ultimately judged across Europe, and the fact City haven't even reached a final. I think you want to take City to a final at least before leaving, because
well, they got to the semi-final under Pellegrini. They didn't turn up for it.
But you did say, he did say in that your favourite book that he would walk away if it wasn't going to plan, and that Khaldoon knows that if the way they've plotted it out isn't working, he will walk.
Which favourite book?
The book
the book he liked. The book he liked.
A great read, Guardiola, yeah.
Even if you don't say yourself.
He says that in the book.
Oh, yeah.
That he will walk away if he feels it's not working out.
You've got to remember, they've got 198 points in the last two seasons in the Premier League.
How do you maintain that? I mean,
it is staggering.
So you could, the Cloughy quote, couldn't you say, throw your medals in the bin, lads, we're going to do it better?
You're not allowed to dip, are you, though, anymore in the next season and say, well, you know what, this season might not work out so well, but hey, we'll come back next season. It doesn't work like that.
But then there's the whole thing which shown itself is the potential FFP ban in the Champions League as well, which could play in his mind.
So
but
he needs to win this season.
Well, in case they're not back in it next year.
Yeah. OK, let's move on, because we need to talk a little bit about Everton. This is quite a blip. 4 Premier League defeats in a row. They've had 5 already this season. Dave, what's going on at Goodison Park?
Well, I mean, it's a problem, and the problem is that they appear not to have, as a team, much strength of character. When things are going well for them, they play good football. Silva has got a plan which he's implemented, and they play it well when it's going well. But as soon as they go behind, as soon as there's any issues, they seem to surrender. And he himself has said that they have not shown enough strength of character. He actually said, after one of the defeats, that they were hiding. He came out and said, my players were hiding on the pitch. Too many of them were hiding. That is a fundamental problem. The club are saying that at the moment he has their backing, but he has the fixture list.
Is it said with conviction?
Well, at the moment, yeah, they believe that he is still in a project which is not a short-term project. They're looking 3 or 4 years. Everton, they didn't get all the players they wanted in the summer. They needed a centre-half and didn't get it. They needed another goal scorer, didn't get it. And they came close to getting both, but eventually didn't. So they understand that they're light. But the problem is, he's got a fixture list from hell in December where they play Liverpool, Arsenal, Manchester United, Leicester, Chelsea, and then they play City in early January. And that is a run where you could not, maybe only get 3 or 4 points. And so they need to be winning between now and then. And they've got some very big games coming up. So for all the fact that they're backing him, I can see if they lose the next 3 games, then they might have real trouble, and they might not have any choice.
I see even the mayor of Liverpool's complaining about his inflexibility. Is that the sense you're getting on Merseyside? Do they think he just won't shake things up?
Well, I mean, it's interesting because I don't know what options he really has. I mean, people are complaining that he's been playing Sigurdsson when Sigurdsson is clearly out of form. And maybe he could have looked a little bit more at that. And they want Moyes Keane to come in and play, and he's not really played. But he's a teenager who's still getting used to the Premier League, and I think.
Do you like the look of him?
Yeah, I think he's a good player, but I think he's going to take a season or so to settle in. It's a totally different game in the Premier League, especially for a teenager. And people forget how young he is because he had a name at Juventus. But it's like he doesn't have a strong squad at the moment. They have played some good football, but they have weaknesses. Set piece weaknesses is appalling. And you heard rumours about players being unhappy because he was on the training ground drilling them set pieces all the time. But you've got to think, well, hang on a minute. There's one way to, not have him on the training ground drilling, and that's get better at set pieces. Stop conceding goals from set pieces, and I have sympathy with him for that. But I think the reality is that, there's 2 problems. One, he doesn't have a connection with the fans, and they don't really know who he is. I don't really know who he is. He seems like a nice guy.
When you say you don't know who he is, why not?
Well, because first of all, his English was not good, and it took a long time, and it's better now. But and secondly, he's not the Klopp type character who has that passion, that obvious passion, and connects with the fans. He hasn't gone out and connected with the fans, and I think that is an issue. And the second issue appears to be that for some reason he doesn't have these strong characters in his squad, and that's not necessarily his fault because he's not buying all the players. director of football who is making those decisions. And, you know, that's a problem for them.
Yeah, it certainly is. 4 defeats in a row in the Premier League for Marco Silva and Everton. It's 5 so far this season. They've got their next game, of course, which is next Saturday lunchtime against West Ham. OK, we're out of time. Thanks very much to the guys for joining us. Thanks to Shaun for joining us this morning. Thanks to Rob, for joining us on the supplement. And to Dave for your company this morning. Good to see you. OK, lots of football coming your way. First up this afternoon is Scotland against San Marino. Wales against Croatia is this evening. Don't forget to download the podcast from all the usual places. Catch up with Shaun on Demand. We'll see you next week at 10 o'clock. Bye for now.
Sky Sports. Feel it all.